All right. So let me I'm going to pull up the roll and then we'll get going. Give me 1 second. Trying to get some windows out the way that I opened up. Okay, all right. So let me go to attendance. All righty. So when you hear your name, please respond. Leanne Adams. Leanne Adams. Are you here, Leanne? A Jane Baker, or is it Ajane?
It's Ajane. I'm here.
Okay, Ajane.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
right. Devin Como,
Here.
Mr. Hill, Jamar Hill, Jeremiah Hogan.
Ryan.
Okay. Tashandra,
I'm here.
Devontae Johnson,
I'm here.
Taylor Morris,
I'm here.
Asia Rashal, Asia Rashal, Julia Tippin,
Here.
Jaden Walsh,
Here.
Darlinda Wright.
Here.
All right. Okay. So we took the roll. Okay. So I'm going to put up my share screen. Give me 1 second. And we're going to get started with today's lecture. We're going to do a review of our first assignment. And I want to make sure everybody got down to the problem of our technical glitches that were happening. And I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So I'm going to put my share screen up. And I want to ask, did anybody experience any technical difficulties with the assignment? I do want to apologize in advance if you did. Basically, we're under somewhat of a new system or a system upgrade. And when I transferred my files from last year to now, there were some errors. It was kind of mixed up instead of having everything exactly in the spaces that I had them in before. So, did anybody experience any problems?
I did,
No.
but I think I emailed you about them and you responded that they were fixed. But it was able, like I was able to download it after the fact.
You were?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So the problem was fixed. All right. So hopefully that's the last of these problems, but you will never be penalized for a technical glitch. It's not going to interfere with your grade because it's not your fault. It's just you know, something that was out of your hands as well as out of my hands due to technology. All right. But we fixed it and we're going to move on. Okay, so let's take a look at the assignment. So I'm going to put this on student view so I can see it the way you all see it. Paleolithic art. The Paleolithic period of human development began over 30,000 years ago and continued for over 9,000 years BCE. Their population stretched across what is now known as Europe. They did not build thriving civilizations and existed primarily as nomads. They had no agricultural technology, yet they still felt an impulse to communicate ideas and transmute meaning through the crafting or fashioning of objects. The Paleolithic artisans created objects that were carved from stone. Okay, so what I want to share with you all, I'm going to leave the student view. Before I get into the homework, I want to share with you all, I mentioned earlier on the first day, the course resources link. Okay, so what I have here is our video, and every day we have a class. I'm posted as a YouTube video. Okay, just in case you need, wonderful, wonderful. Okay. Darlinda Wright.
Here.
Right. And I do that, so if you need to study for something, that you can refer back to that course, okay? And so right here, I have the Paleolithic notes that we're going to cover, okay? So introduction, okay, introduction to prehistoric art. Okay, archaeologists have identified 4 basic types of Stone Age art. Petroglyphs, which includes rock carvings and engravings, pictographs, which include pictorial imagery, ideomorphs, which are used as symbols, and a category that includes cave paintings and drawings. So I'm going to refer back to our assignment, and then we'll get started. Yeah, so here's the interesting thing about the Paleolithic artwork and the Paleolithic era. Of course, it does go back 30,000 years, but what is often not discussed, okay, so the Paleolithic world was primarily the world that we refer to as contemporary Europe and the Europeans. Uh, this was mostly, this was somewhat, there are troglodyte eras of the Paleolithic experience. Troglodyte is a term that refers to cave dwellers. So the notion of the Neanderthal, of the caveman, of the you know, the unwashed savage, that is the image that comes to mind for most people who've studied the Paleolithic era. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Even though the Paleolithic era goes back over 30,000 years, and they were, you know, moving between nomadic tribal life as well as cave life, there's evidence of high technology existing in other parts of the planet. So when we look at history, we have to understand that technology, wisdom, and expertise were not equally distributed. Okay, so Paleolithic, one feature of Paleolithic art that we want to be aware of is that most of the existing Paleolithic artifacts are portable. So that means they're you know, roughly handheld size. Okay, so you don't have large monumental structures that were made during the Paleolithic period. If you did, they were rare. And most of their work was based on fertility, right? Because these were very primitive people. So to primitive people, fertility is a very basic expression. Okay, of course, survival. Since they did not grow crops, they were in a hunter-gatherer sort of modality, as well as exaggeration, as what is most notably with the famous Venus of Willendorf figure, the exaggeration of the breast and abdominal region. But then again, it might not have been an exaggeration. They might have been killing a lot of animals and eating a lot of food. Okay, so we have Nude Woman or Venus of Willendorf, which was discovered in Willendorf, Austria. This piece is 28,000 to 25,000 BCE years old. BCE means before Christ event. And this is carved out of limestone, and it is only 4¼ inches high. So it is a very small structure. So this is the type of thing that someone was making while holding in their hand and carving. Okay. Now, the Paleolithic dates and places, they go back 30,000 years, and it happened over a 9,000 year period in Western Europe. And as I mentioned before, the people were nomads and hunter gatherers. Now, I'm going to refer to our notes right quick. So bear with me. Any questions so far before I switch it up?
No.
Pretty straightforward, right? Okay, so let's go to the course resources area and go back to our Paleolithic notes. Okay, let's go to types. Okay, we went over types. Let's look at prehistoric sculpture. Open. Oh, this is the Sorry about this, folks. This is the wrong link. I have to switch it up. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so we'll just go back to our note. I'm going to edit that a little bit better. I'm going to go back to our course, go back to our assignment. All right, Paleolithic. All right, PowerPoint. Okay, all right, so there were nomads and hunter-gatherers. Okay, so when you have nomadic people, they drift, they wander, they go from place to place. Oftentimes, they will use a cave for shelter, and they were engaged very much in the hunt. So their artwork depicts that which was bringing them food. Okay, so what we have here are two bison, and these are referred to as reliefs. So for those who aren't aware, a relief is a sculpture that is designed to be viewed from one side only. A classic example of a relief would be the imagery that you see on coins. The imagery on a coin is relatively flat, but it is defined. So they carve reliefs into walls of bison or things that they found appetizing. Okay. But once again, look at the scale. It's 2 feet and 7/8 inches long. So these are, once again, relatively small compositions that they were probably able to carve. So once again, you see this is done within a 15,000, 10,000 year period. They were able to do somewhat representational work. But when they mention exaggeration, exaggeration simply means that they were focused more on several elements than the totality. Okay. Paleolithic. The themes of the artwork are survival, once again, because they're a primitive people, fertility, and animals. And the animals that they would depict were almost always animals that they would use for food, because since they didn't have agriculture, they didn't have a need to have animals to be hitched to plows and form rows and rows of crops. So when you think of a culture that did not have agriculture, you're talking about a culture where the people didn't live very long because they were only consuming meat. You're talking about a culture where injuries would happen often while in pursuit of these animals. And so, and you're also talking a tribal sensibility. Okay. All right. Let me get back to this. Where's the rest? Okay, there we go. Some more images. Wonder where that went. Okay, so forms, anatomical exaggeration. We covered that. Pictorial definition. What that means is, for example, it is very basic imagery. Things that pictorial definition means that the picture is basically the definition of what you're looking at. There's not layers and levels of meaning to decode and decipher. It's just basic representations. So this is spotted horses and negative hand imprints. And these are wall paintings in the cave at Pé-Méréel in France, 23,000, 22,000 BCE, 11 feet by 2 inches long. So when we have tests, all of the vocabulary terms will be word banks and multiple choice, and there will be maybe 5% of the questions to 5 to 10% of the questions will be based on images. You will be expected to be able to identify the images and in a fill in the blank type of thing. So for example, you will see this image and this will be blank horses or blank and negative hand imprints. So you want to be very familiar with the images. So do we see those hand impressions? They almost look spray painted, don't they? But you can walk up and fit your hand in it and have some level of contact with the original artist. Not contact, but level of understanding. Now we have another cave painting. This is the left wall of the Hall of the Bulls in the cave at Lascaux, France, 16,000 to 14,000 BCE. The largest bull is 11 feet long. So this is a pretty large scene. Now, they were using crushed plant fiber to make these drawings with crushed and burned plant fiber. And the beautiful thing about rock and stone is if it is a porous stone, it takes very well to pigments. And you know, for something to last for 16,000 years, that is a serious potency there. And so we have this large bull that is 11 feet by 6 inches. And then we have these other structures. But you see the pictorial nature of it is it's defined. It's just showing herds of bull. You know, so they weren't hurting these creatures. They were hurting naturally. And they would basically, as a predator, target the weak one. And then that would be dinner for the night. Okay, so now we have a rhinoceros, wounded man, and disemboweled bison. So if we had to interpret this, we would say this was the entrails of the bison. This is the bison itself, and this is the wounded man. Now, I want you all to look at this and give me your interpretation, because one thing about art and history is that it is subject to interpretation. So whoever gets there first, they get to define this image. So I'm going to ask Miss Wright to give us your interpretation of this image.
So I see, is that like a bow and arrow right there next to the figure?
Okay, right here.
Yeah, in the center. Oh
Okay.
yeah, I'm seeing like a bow and arrow next to the figure, and I'm guessing that's something like a bison that's next to it. So I'm guessing the subject matter of it would be more than likely hunting, or they're recapturing a hunt that they have already done.
Now, my question for, does anybody have an idea of what this figure is? Can everybody see my cursor? Would anybody like to take that on? What is this figure?
Is it a rhino?
It kind of looks like a rhinoceros or some sort of horned beast. Now, if we look closely, I can't zoom in anymore, but you can see the head of the bison and the two horns right here. Now, does anybody have a sense of what this is? The thing I'm circling with my cursor.
It looks like a bird.
It does look like
a bird.
A type of duck, right? So you have a duck here. Now, let's talk about this male figure. The historian interpreted this figure as wounded. Okay, what do we see? What is it about this male figure? Does this figure appear to be laying down? Is the figure standing up at a weird angle? What's up with this figure?
It looks like he's on his back.
Okay.
Or
anything else?
Falling? It looked like he may be falling.
So we see the angle of the bull's head and the horns, and the male falling on his back. That's a horrible picture. Means he took a bad one. But does this read and register as disemboweled to you all?
Yeah, I can see how that reads as that.
Wow. So
No, I feel like he was just stunned.
What's that?
I said I feel like he was just stunned.
Maybe stunned, huh? Maybe stunned. Okay. Now, so we have what appears to. So why would you have a rhinoceros in the same environment as a bison? Maybe the world was. This almost looks like a wild boar to me. Like a wild boar pig, because I think a rhino would be bigger. But you see how different the interpretations can be. Now, the bison is 3 feet 4.5 inches wide from here to here. So that would make this human figure about 2 feet. And this other creature that they call a rhino that would make this rhino roughly maybe 2.5 feet from horn to tail. And rhinos are huge. So the rhino would be much larger than a human, in my opinion. But you see how cool it is to go back and just sort of look at this stuff? Okay, so uh, let's go to this one. All right, so does anybody see anything in this one that runs counter to its description? I'm going to ask Mr. Walsh.
It kind of looks like a stampede. Yeah, I see a bunch of variety of animals. So I really do think it contradicts what the caption says.
Wow. So imagine, you're basically in a loincloth with a stick with a sharpened stone. You have to engage that herd and get dinner. And maybe that's how this guy ended up getting injured. He might have got dinner for the night, but he got gored by this bull, by this bison. Okay. All right. So that was the first assignment. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to do an overview of the second assignment. And I'm just going to make sure that everything downloads correctly so no one will run into any problems with this. So I'm going to download the homework. Okay. Okay, the homework is where it should be. All right. And I'm going to open up the PowerPoint. So we're looking at slides 6 through 13 as we discussed the Neolithic age, stretched from 9,000 to 2000 BCE. During this era of human development, people enjoyed a vastly higher level of living, well beyond hunter-gatherer. Different means of food production evolved along with traditional activities and new family structure models as well. Okay, so let's take a look. Starting on slide number. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the Neolithic themes, human activity. And okay, so in the Neolithic era, once you crack the code of having a variety of food sources, that's usually when human activity takes a leap and you can slow down long enough to learn things. Okay, so this is entitled Deer Hunt. And okay, so does this seem more organized and sophisticated than the prior era of work? I'm going to ask this question to Mr. Hogan. Would you look at this and say this seems more advanced than the Paleolithic?
In my opinion, yeah, I would say it does. Because you
Can
can
you?
see them doing movements. Like you see how
Mhm.
at the top left he's doing like a spear throw at the
Right.
deer.
So they're able to go beyond just basic capturing of images and they're able to sort of imply different movements. Okay. Let's ask Ajane. Do you see a significant evolution with this image in relation to the Paleolithic?
Yes, to me it seems like they're more organized. They have more people in the picture instead of like the Paleolithic era had like one person.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is interesting because this was taken from a cave in Turkey, and the carbon dating has brought the era back to 5,750 BCE. Okay, so another example of Neolithic work, monumental sculpture. So when we refer to monumental, we're talking something much larger than life size. So if the typical adult male is around 6 feet and a typical adult female is around 5'7", the monumental sculpture would be 15 to 30 feet. you know. So now there is a correlation between the development of religious ideology and the development of monumental sculpture. What do you think that connection is? I'm going to ask, what do you think that connection is, Devin, between monumental sculpture and the early development of religions? Is Devin there? Okay, well, I'll ask Taylor. What do you think the connection is between being able to make giant sculpture or in monuments and religion?
So I think that they relate because what is it called? Idol, I
Idol worship,
yeah,
right?
idol worship. That's what it's called. So I think that they built these monuments so that they could have something to worship.
Very good, very good. So they would have something to worship, and the larger the icon or the idol, the more people could be involved. Okay, so monumental sculpture, that is how we know we're now in the Neolithic era. Uh, more evidence of physical gestures and better communication through their artwork. Okay, they started to work and build structures that they could live in with plaster, reeds, and twine. So they were able to make their own plaster. And normally, plaster is made by pulverizing a porous stone, such as limestone, and then burning it, or cooking it, putting it under fire. Limestone tends to be a very wet stone. Lots of ancient people were able to carve limestone with a sharpened wooden stick or obsidian volcanic glass, and then they would let it dry and cure up, and then it would turn into a solid thing. But when it comes to making plaster, they take the limestone and pulverize it, and then they roast it. And after that, it becomes powdery. Then they can mix it with water, and they can have more flexibility and use it in concert with the reeds and twine. Ritually buried. This is definitely a sign of cultural advancement, whereas before the Paleolith would not have established burial rituals according to the history until the very later parts. And that would be something, it'd be very basic. It'd be like, they would put the person under some rocks. But, the deterioration of the body, would still be kind of evident. But to have someone ritually buried, that means they were digging holes because they learned from the Paleolithic era that disease can spread if you let bodies decompose above the ground. And most importantly, they live in planned towns. The Paleolith was a hunter gatherer nomad. They went where the food was. They often would follow the herds of cattle that they would use for food. So, what we have here is a human figure from Jordan, which is in what we call the Middle East, from 6500 BCE. This is plaster, painted, and inlaid with cowrie shell and bitumen. And this is 3 feet, 5 3/8 inches. Okay, so let's take a closer look at this. So this is a plaster image. We see a lot of cracks in it because it's old, but we can tell that this was probably a very smooth effigy.
Nope.
All right, so.
Scary.
Hmm?
You're lame and you're scary.
I guess I am.
So, Mr. Hill, what's going on?
Dude. What's up?
Okay, why don't you mute your mic?
Right.
I'm hearing what's happening in your house. Yeah, okay. All right, so let's continue. All right, so the Neolithic dates and places, 9,000 to 2000 BCE. This is in Western Europe and what is referred to as the Near East, which we refer to today as the Middle East. And I think you'll find it interesting that everywhere you have great monuments in the ancient world in the Middle East, is where the wars are at. Okay, so the people settled in villages. You had agriculture, so you had farmers. So agricultural farmers are probably some of the first scientists. So they're working with the soil. They're renewing the soil. They're collecting seeds. They're growing larger and larger crops and able to feed more people. So that would add to the desire to settle in villages. And they had complex rituals. So when people would join together for marriage, there was a ritual. When people would have children, there would be rituals for that. So all the things that are signifiers of civilization started to happen in the early Neolithic era. So Stonehenge, this is something you'll see in the test. This is an aerial view of Stonehenge in Wiltshire, England. Now, here's what's disturbing about Stonehenge, okay? Part of this was made in recent history. You had the original Stonehenge, but if you look at videos or photos from the other side of this, you'll see places where the stones have been patched and plastered. You'll see evidence of some manipulation, but the initial space is still intact. Okay, so this is definitely a ritualistic site. What are the signs of ritualistic sites? Often circular spaces. Circular spaces are often used for ritual. Oftentimes, I'll give you an example of a culture and a religion that believes in circumambulation or moving in circles as they worship would be the Hindu people. They believe in circumambulation. They have their idol that they're worshiping in the center, and they move around it as they pray. We'll see examples of that coming out of India later on. But yeah, this is Stonehenge, and this goes back to 2550 to 1600 BCE. That is a really big stretch of time to account for the development of one piece of work. Okay, so now what we want to gather from the Neolithic building was the introduction of post and lintel construction. So when we see these two pillars, these are our posts, and this stone that is built across those two pillars, that is your lintel. So this is how many doorways and thresholds grew to be developed. So post and lintel construction allows for heavy objects to be supported by heavier objects. Monumental architecture. So that is the building of very large buildings and structures, as well as megaliths. We could look at Stonehenge as a megalith based on the substantial weight of each of these elements. So it took human ingenuity and physical brute force to align these stones and bring them to this site. To bring the stones to this site, stand them upright and align them in these complex structures. Now, many historians would say that these are anatomical observatories, and that under certain conditions, certain times of the year, you can see certain star constellations through these post and lintel openings. Okay. All right. So that's the next set of imagery to work with. Okay. Let me see one more thing. Okay. So themes: human activity, building for community. So since they had villages and they had agrarian societies, they were ripe for larger communities. Okay, the forms they will give you composite views. So that is how we describe this type of cave art. This is what we would call a composite view, where it's not just a running herd of animals. Sorry about that, folks. Where it's not just a running herd of animals, and you see composite views where you have somewhat of a foreground and somewhat of a background. So we have the central figure being the whatever beast, source of meat they're hunting, and you have a sense of the activity. We refer to that as a composite view. Okay, let me get back to this. Okay, so mud, brick, and stone construction. So many of their villages were composed out of mud bricks. And anyone who's ever taken ceramics knows that a lot of the mud in certain parts of the world, normally, if you have an agrarian society, you're going to set it up near a river, because when the river banks expand into your farm, it leaves behind lots of silt and rich sediment that can restore your soil so you can grow things. And stone construction, post and lintel, and monumental sculpture. So those are the basics of Neolithic culture. So does anyone have any questions? Okay, all right. So what would you say would be the type of one of the rituals that, like the ritual burials, the graveyards? This is where you start to find bones and artifacts. Whereas with the Paleolithic, oftentimes there's not a lot of body parts. You do have the Neander. So how many people are aware that there's actually not a complete set of bones from the Neanderthal era? Neander was a lake, and they found a small shard of human skull bone in the lake after it dried up, and they were sorting through it. They found what they said is a bone. And then from there, they took that bone and pieced together a skull. And this is supposed to be the skull of a Neanderthal. So they don't even have a complete skeleton of a Neanderthal. And so they combine it with Paleolithic. How many people have heard of the Paleolithic diet?
I've heard of that. The paleo diet.
I heard of it.
And we know that that diet is basically all carbs and meat, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so those people had no access, no consistent access to fruits and vegetables. They probably would forage in the process of chasing the meat. They might run through a field that has some edible fruits and vegetables, but it was really about the meat with these people. So they're very much into killing their food. And, you know, everyone would take a part of the kill back to their cave or their outback setting, and then cook it or eat it raw. Wow. Okay, so but here's one thing I want to remind everyone of. While these people were living in the, I guess, early stages of civilization, other parts of the world were highly developed and advanced. They already had generational wealth. They already had an ability to mine things. They also had they had laws, rules, and statutes. So all of this was happening in other parts of the world, while in Europe and the Near East, you had this sort of barbarian type of reality. Okay, so this is why you rarely see in the movies, you rarely see depictions of black cavemen. Can anybody recall seeing that in any form of media, black cave people?
No.
The reason being is just no one's really buying it. No one buys it because it's like, wow, it would be a difficult thing to sell. Okay, so you're gonna have it just doesn't even add up. That's why they don't even play that game. It's totally a European thing. Okay, so are there any questions? Okay, folks, I want to show you one more thing, and then I'm going to let you go and enjoy your Friday. I want to make sure that everybody is aware of after each lecture, okay, that lecture will be placed in this bank of information called course videos. So the next one will say Art History Day 2, and we'll go all the way. I think since we meet 3 days a week, I think we're going to be at like 45 class meetings this semester, 45 class meetings. So if there are no questions and everything seems to be working well with the technical stuff, I bid you adieu. And I will see you all again on Monday.
All right.
Okay.
See you on Monday.
Have a good day.
You too.